This is the final go no go poll for Flight 3 of Starship. Invite 2.
Go.
Stage 1.
Go.
Stage 2.
Go.
Flight director is go for launch.
We are at 2:00 on Tuesday, May 14th, 2024. I'm James Melton, Chief Ambassador of the Mars Society. This is the Ambassador Briefing, and our mission statement is to let Dean Arvidsson in. Okay, our mission statement is to serve as a professional team of people dedicated to elevating public awareness of our mission to land humans on Mars within this decade and begin settling the red planet. As I said many times before, no easy task. We're going to be taking a look at that seriously today in many ways. We've got several people who will be talking. Connor McGibbony is going to be one. Then we're going to have Ashton Zeth tell us a little bit about, let me bring Joe on board here. A little bit about what he's planning for 2024. And, hi, Dean. And we'll keep on bringing people on board as they come in. But I want to jump right into this because I want to hear it from Connor. Connor, thank you so much for sharing a little bit. I've read through a lot of your work. You're up in Canada, correct?
I'm in California.
Oh, you're in California. Okay. All right. Excellent. What part of California?
Bernie, Fall River Mills, Shasta County.
Oh, Shasta County. Okay. Yeah, good area. Up near Weed.
Up near the Hat Creek Observatory too.
Yeah. Okay. Excellent. And then I would like to just jump right in and introduce you. I've sketched out a couple of things here that some people may or may not know about you. Ambassador Connor McGibbony received his undergraduate degree in physics from Southeastern Louisiana University. Oh, Dana, my wife, went to LSU, and that's in Baton Rouge. I don't know, is that where Southern Louisiana University is, Connor?
We're about 45 minutes away from Baton Rouge.
Okay. In his opinion, many students studying mathematics, physics, chemistry, and computer science have a great deal of interest in spaceflight and human exploration of space, yet they are not always sure how to participate and get involved in the space exploration community. And Connor, you say, I think the Mars Society is a great way to get STEM students involved in space advocacy. If you would please unroll a little bit of what you're planning for 2024 and what aspects you're going to talk about with young people and where you might be doing that.
Sure. Is there a way to share my screen, share my presentation?
Of course, yes.
I wanted to share with you guys a little bit about my research and what I'm going to be doing for the Mars Society. Because of my research, it puts me, in lots of opportunities to speak about space exploration and science. Like Jim said, my secret power is to get students super excited about space exploration. So, whenever I'm out in the field talking to different universities, different high schools or elementary students, I always want to get them jazzed up about Mars, get them asking questions to me, to their parents. So currently, I'm ambassador for the Mars Society. I'm also the chair of the RAM Accelerator Research Group, which I'll let you guys know a little bit about. And I'm an active member of Gene Lab's Analysis Working Group. So basically, my main research interests are how can we get more stuff to space and how can we survive in space. So if you look at this graphic here, this is a concept of this geometry for an aerospace vehicle that I'm working on. And a fair question to ask would be like, is this some kind of magical space unicorn concept for a space vehicle? And actually, no, it is a real design to be used in a RAM accelerator. Over here is a two-dimensional view next to the three-dimensional view. And back when I was in school, it got a AIAA award. And basically, just so rockets are limited. If you think about the Saturn V, there's this like little tiny bit of payload compared to this ginormous structure and fuel and oxidizer. Well, basically the rockets are carrying less than 8% payload, and a RAM accelerator could carry 35 to 50% payload. The only problem is that, at high velocities, the projectiles vaporize. And so my academic work was trying to solve that issue just a little bit. The reason a RAM accelerator could have could potentially, in theory, carry such large payloads to space is because you don't need to carry the fuel and oxidizer on board. And so if you're curious about that, you can read my thesis online. If you look it up, it's called RAM Accelerator Design Considerations for Aerospace Engineers. There's no paywall, so you could read it for free. If you're going to introduce such a new concept, you should put it out there for free so anybody could read it and criticize it. So if you have any criticisms or questions, I would be happy to answer them. So because the thesis laid out a research program along with discussing solutions for the intense thermal loading, we started, my professor and other researchers started the RAM Accelerator Research Group, and we're looking at all sorts of different components of the engineering problems. And just to, because of time, just to our, this issue of, we have this idea to use laser ignition instead of traditional pyrotechnics to make a more symmetric initiation of the combustion front. Also, there's this really cool research that we could do with these desktop centrifuges. We could put micro or really small electronics inside there and to do a high G loading test and test to see if certain electronics can log data while undergoing high G loads. And these desktop centrifuges are super inexpensive, so it's pretty cool that we could do inexpensive research that way. Those are just two of the things we're looking at. We're certainly continuing the thermodynamics research. I'm also in the Gene Labs analysis working group looking at bioregenerative life support systems. We're all looking at how can we survive in space. And so one thing I'm looking at is what Earth-based systems can help answer questions for space systems. What is going on in the microbiome of hydroponics and aquaponics systems. Nobody actually knows this, right? I mean, there's not a lot of papers or any that I could look up and see, what's going on in the microbiome of these types of systems. And, if we're going to design a control system for the next generation bioregenerative life support systems, you could assess the health of astronauts and the bioregenerative life support systems from what comes at what enters the toilet system. So this microbiome analysis is really crucial, and it's not being done yet. And again, our cheap desktop centrifuge comes back, because we could look at what biological components of these types of life support systems could survive the type of G loading that a RAM accelerator would experience. And so with that work in mind, when I'm discussing Mars, and getting in front of students, it's a great leeway for me to be like, okay, and this is what a large global network of everybody from academics to regulation to space advocates, are all involved in advocating for Mars, humans on Mars in the next 10 years. And what drew me, and I'm going to mention some things, as I mentioned, some upcoming talks for the Mars Society, but I'm going to mention some things that stick out to me as an academic that, you guys could use in your arsenal to reach other people about the Mars Society.
Sure.
And one of the biggest things is, Dr. Zubrin was looking at, how can we get more to Mars? And his solution was, okay, let's make the propellant for the return journey on Mars. And that's a big, idea. That's, that idea on its own is like the Saturn V, right? That theory, Zubrin's theory, enabled a whole different level of mission planning for Mars. And another aspect is that, this is a global society. We're one planet. We're trying to, bring civilization to Mars. And that was a big deal for me wanting to be a part of this organization and be an ambassador. And this question comes up a lot. Why Mars? What about Moon and the asteroids? And, I have a very deep answer to this, and it has to do with this book that the Mars Society put out. And if you haven't gotten a copy, I think you all should get a copy of this and go through it and look for things that stick out for you. But we have a lot of problems in our society that I don't believe are going to be solved if we go for asteroids next and try to over commercialize that aspect of our society. When I read this book, I saw that these researchers were working on more serious sociological aspects of, how do we build a society on another planet? How do we create opportunity for these researchers? And so that influenced my decision. So yeah, we should go to Mars next, right? We already went to the moon, right? And there's other things that are going to happen on the moon, and but we need to when you're far away, a 20-minute signal away from Earth, there are a lot of things that you're going to have to innovate that you can't innovate on the moon. And so another thing I want people to realize is that, what Elon Musk is working on, those aren't action figures in that in this picture. Those are real people. This is a big spaceship, and it's going to enable the transportation of people to the red planet. Also, what I want people to know is that when I give talks at universities and I talk about if you're a member of the Mars Society, you can, because Mars Society is a NASA affiliate, right? You can join the NASA Federal Credit Union, and that has piqued many professors' interest. Professors, want to advocate, for their students to join a reputable organization, because there's lots of organizations, like fake honor societies going around to college students. So the fact that Mars Society is a NASA affiliate, to the extent that you can get a NASA bank account, it, weighs a lot on, it presents us in a very favorable light to professors.
The Mars Society has been around since 1998, so it's rather credible and known actually worldwide. We're in about 41 countries, so that's a big asset to bring to these people, letting them know that they're not becoming involved in just a quick upstart program. And we're learning all the time. And one thing I like about the Mars Society is their openness to new ideas. So forgive me, I know you want to wrap it up here, but go ahead, Connor.
Oh, and I'm glad you mentioned that, and what I'm seeing too is, academics, we're all sometimes in our own bubble, and they're always focused on their own research. And so it's nice to open them up to what Mars Society is doing. Wrapping up, I make sure students know that they can get this free software from NASA and plan their own Mars missions. The round of talks that I'm going to be giving, I am in talks with the Lions Club in a few different cities because I know you guys wanted me to, step outside of my own box. But most of my other talks are, planned at Shasta College, Chico State, the high schools and elementary schools around here. And it's going to be an exciting year of talks for me. So I just, if anybody has any questions briefly, I know we got an exciting program today, but I'm happy if anybody has anything to say to briefly answer your question.
Thank you, Connor, for the good work you're doing. We really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Ashton, next week, Tuesday, 5 o'clock Pacific time. What's going on Red Planet Live?
For our next episode, this will be a panel. We're going to have a group discussion, which I'm looking forward to. Two individuals that are science journalists and reporters. One is Ling Xin. She's originally from Beijing, but she's now based in Ohio. And she also has some publications from the South China Morning Post, Scientific America, Physics World, all well-known publications. And then the other person I have confirmed is Laura Forsyth. She's also a space analyst. She's got publications in CNN, Bloomberg, New York Times, again, well-known publications. So looking forward to speaking with both of them. We may have a third person up in the air on the third person, but for now we have those two individuals that will be joining me next week.
Excellent. Your podcasts are always intriguing. I really enjoy them. I've been on several of them, and you always pull out the best of the best in your people. So
thank you so much. And I always appreciate you tuning in. I love seeing your comments when you're joining in the conversation.
Thanks, Ashton, for sharing a little bit about what you're doing. G. Thomas Kerr. I have met this gentleman, and I was eager to introduce him to you. I don't know how many of you have read his works or know about what he does, but let me just read a little brief that I sketched out here. G. Thomas Kerr is a seasoned technology consultant with over 3 decades of experience assisting businesses in achieving their objectives through cutting-edge technology solutions. And his knowledge in this area will speak for itself, I guarantee you. His expertise in artificial intelligence, AI, has granted him a broad perspective of implementing critical AI initiatives across a diverse range of sectors, including, and I didn't authorize this with you, Thomas. I understand you were invited to Washington, D.C. to partake in a governmental think tank. Now, I don't know if you can talk about that or that's confidential.
It's always NDA driven, but the touch point is simply that a think tank really needed training to get the ethics side of this. And I made such a key point about that element in my book, and they ended up buying books for the management team to sort of, orient to a baseline as to how to deal with those issues.
Okay. The book is called AI Unleashed, Transform Your Organization into an Intelligent Powerhouse. I have delved into this book. I haven't gotten through it totally yet, but I'm picking up a lot of good ideas. If we could take this, I'm not going to say from step one, there probably are a number of people who are on board. James Burke, for sure, who has AI backgrounds and is savvy. But let's say someone like me steps on board and doesn't have anything. Maybe you can give us a brief overview of how this relates to Mars, what we can do to create a governing society on Mars. Just a little brief thing you can throw in. The propulsion systems to get to Mars, What's the difference between AI and AGI? Just step in here and give us a little
Well,
overview of
yeah,
what's going
thanks,
on
Jim.
in the new world of AI.
We're really at an inflection point, and it really started almost 2 years ago when the public got access to, generative pre-trained transformers or GPTs. And all of a sudden, we had access to data sciences at a mass connection that we hadn't had previously. But these data sciences, algorithms, and the umbrella of AI has been going back quite a ways, both in business and government. So not a lot of new there. What's new is who has access to it and how it's being tested and the amount of data training that's going on. So that was the impetus for my book. The first thing that happened is we did a bunch of case studies to sort of show our clients how strategic this is, and that if you don't at least embrace a baseline for artificial intelligence, likely your competitors will. So we were trying to give them some insight to allocate resources, pay attention, and perhaps even board level, chief AI officer type folks for our bigger clients. And so that brought us around to the idea that we had to emphasize the importance of vertical GPT versus horizontal, because that's where a lot of the confusion was, notwithstanding the controversies. And so in a nutshell, horizontal LLMs that drive all of this interesting AI stuff is really valuable, much like the internet, much like the smartphone, much like email. These are just pervasive tools we all accept and enjoy mostly. But those horizontal GPTs are somewhat limited in scope. When you go vertical, when things are trained on your corpus of data, when you have proprietary data, it's really an accelerant moment. We had a lot of clients with data and they didn't understand the value of their data. And once we showed them why vertical GPTs mattered to them, they realized that they could catapult ahead by embracing this technology and building the right algorithm, LLM, et cetera, and training models. The mystery that throws people is how it works. And I really like to demystify.
When you talk about LLMs, talking about
that's the large language models that we can use, conversational things to get answers, and the Surrey stuff, all the different things you see today, all that's LLM driven for the most part. It's under the umbrella of AI. It's a specific data science algorithmic thing. But the important thing to understand about this is that it's all about patterns. You see, everything has a pattern. And if I say to you peanut butter and, you may say jelly, but the next person may say chocolate. So in the basis weighting in an AI training algorithm be jelly's going to have a 10 and chocolate's going to have a 2. And now we have a mathematical model to work from. And it's that simple that patterns are the driver of all of this. And so it demystifies it a little bit, which of course begs the question, well, what value will it create? Well, in reality, most people spend their lifetimes learning things, and it's patterns that we learn. If you wanted to get a master's in fine art, you'd have to study every major movement the last 2 millennia, and then maybe you're going to develop a voice and say something in the conversation of the arts. But it's the patterns of voice, technique, methodology, and other things that are the attributes of a successful artist. And by studying it, you've trained your way to do it your own way. So that's the core of it. It's about patterns that basically are readily apparent in data. And the more data you have, the more training, likely there's more intelligence that's going to be derived from it. From my perspective, the controversy is what pulled me more to do public speaking and blogging and writing, because it's divisive. It turns out that not everybody's on board with this idea. There's a lot of controversy we hear all the time, and compression of labor and displacement of jobs and other things. So it's not without its challenges. But I'd like to do a little thought experiment for folks. Is just imagine if we went back to the 1940s and the vacuum tube is how we're signal processing almost everything here on Earth. And we're just a few short years away from the transistor being developed by Bell Labs. And suddenly solid state electronics blossom in the next 10 years. That is where AI is right now. We are in the vacuum tube mode. And so just fathom the profundity of what shifts in the coming years from the late 40s forward. Just ponder that. That's really the metaphor here. And of course, the controversy lies in once we get to an AGI, which is an artificial general intelligence, where there's perhaps reason and sentient emotion and other things that are not associated with synthetic intelligence, but human consciousness. That is where we get into some friction and issues. But just imagine having a super intelligence that can solve the problems we all recognize, such as propulsion systems, such as climate change, such as governance. There's just so many, energy. The fact is that we could have 1,000 Albert Einsteins at our fingertips. Perhaps for $20 a month, you rent that server. And so it's just so profound in my idea of where this takes us and how many things can be improved, and the amplification of humanity will benefit by having these kinds of ideas. And many of my clients immediately have policy issues to solve these issues as to who's going to do what and what's allowed and what's not. And so delving into it's really important, having some structure at a corporate level. Obviously, it's all happening right now. But as it applies to solving problems, the AGI is the big deal, that singularity in the moment that we have an intelligent synthetic intelligence. When the Center for Theoretical Physics at MIT accesses an AGI, potentially they're going to alter the course of humanity in the first 5 minutes of conversation. So just think about the profound impact of that, just on theoretical physics alone, that suddenly we could be looking at a paradigm shift in transportation, energy, sciences, even thermodynamics may have nuances that will be revealed. Gravity, and obviously the unified field theory, and so many other areas of science that we've had great achievement in, but could be catapulted into a whole new level. Traditional propulsion, which I think is a key thing here for the Mars Society, we're getting to Mars. It is a mathematical certainty. What's not certain is the timeline. I'd love it was in this decade, and it's quite possible. But the impact of an AGI on this mission cannot be understated. Theoretically, getting into propulsion physics, things like gravity multiplier and gravity wave, and understanding gravity and other things in space-time and space curve and other advanced topics that is nimble in the conversation of physics. In real-world practical matter, right now we're pretty much contained to the thermodynamics umbrella, which of course is nuclear, thermal, ion, maybe chemical, and other propulsion methods, which I'm sure you're all familiar with. But AGI is going to have an impact here, and I believe it's going to be positive. And I just can't fathom anyone wanting to get in the way of this achievement, this advancement, any more than you'd want to stop the transistor in 47 for being invented. We don't want to get in the way of an AGI development. And Sam Altman, of course, chairman of OpenAI, one of the big drivers of this, lost his job over it. As you probably all know, some of the corporate issues there over at OpenAI, and he went back in, and the dev team was backing him, et cetera. So it's not without its controversy. I don't want to dismiss that. But humanity stands to gain a great deal of benefits from this technology.
And we're actually in a propulsion transition. That's what you're telling us, right? Absolutely.
Yeah, we're on the cusp of perhaps some breakthroughs, and it always comes back to the math. I was at MIT in the late 80s, and I had the privilege of being with the MIT Enterprise Forum, and I saw how capital formation went to, risk capital went into ideas, and how emerging technology got backed, and whether that bridged over to VCs, et cetera. So I learned a lot about risk in technology, and I consider myself an optimist, yet cautiously optimistic for some things to come to fruition on a timeline that you may not fully understand or grasp. So it gets into some areas that people have a difficult time, and all I want for the message is for people to have an open mind, have policy and structure, delve into it, make it part of your life, have your dream in mind, and embrace this technology as it's about to shift us, just as we saw the smartphone shift, we saw the internet. We can go all the way back to electricity. You can use any paradigm to see the impact on society, which is mostly good. By and large, fire is dangerous, but we need it. This is the concept that we all have to embrace, that there's a potential here to help everybody on Earth and future society as well. So those are the tenets of where I'm coming from. And, back to my book, the message in my book was the idea that you embrace a vertical GPT build, and that your organization has tremendous value in your data. And of course, that cat's out of the bag now. the value of data has skyrocketed, and every organization now is defending their data more than their bars of gold or their money. And so data is turning out to be the new oil in corporate America, and just the value of that data is almost incalculable for most organizations. And so that is a big shift that's happened due to AI and the master algorithms driving all of this. And I just see that as, building and standing on the shoulders for future development. And I really think this is going to shift everything very soon. I hate to give timelines. Predictions are difficult. But my metaphor with the vacuum tube, which I'm sure many of you are familiar with that time frame and what happened, it's here. It's the same parallel moment.
Thomas, when you're talking about data, you're talking about horizontal and vertical data, and the artificial general intelligence being a pool. I'm just
Yeah, so let me tie that together a little bit. The idea of AGI is that it would have access to greater pools of data and models, and potentially build its own models and data synthetically to fill in those gaps. But just fathom the depth of just the Library of Congress and all the research at the academic level, every paper, every thesis. It has every potential informational idea and data that it can train on and get intelligent observation from. And all the training models that drive that, of course, are somewhat proprietary at that level. But it will all go to open source eventually. And I think that's the key here, that there's nothing nefarious built into it. We don't have this hidden agenda moment that's going to scare us or pop out of a moment of technology. And so those core things of open source and cross-training and other aspects of AGI, that I think it ends up giving us more confidence that it will go the right way. Despite the naysayers, there are a lot of detracting voices from this. Regulatory and compliance and many other areas of this get to be really challenging. But superintelligence and the ability to access it and solve problems. You perhaps caught yesterday that OpenAI now has introduced the voice-driven part of their GPTs. And of course, they're calling it 4.0 or 4.0. The O is omni, and now it can have conversation, sort of start to create computer conversation with all of the data modeling that it has, which is pretty extensive. It's notwithstanding some of the challenge, of course, of what data was used and who's in charge of validation and all that. At the core of data sciences, I really like to emphasize that any kind of thumb on the scale gets exposed. It is very, very difficult to hold long-term modifications in data, training models, human in the loop, any kind of inference, any kind of basis weighting, because data is split, scrubbed, compared, and multiplied and analyzed through different groups with different resources and insights. And my metaphor here is that when the handheld calculator dropped in 1972, we didn't have to have an auditor check all the functions, did we? We all started using the handheld calculator and it worked. I don't think it ever made a mistake. If there were any errors, it was the user and not the logic. So that's my metaphor for AGI, that it will drop like the handheld calculator with its perfect data model, and anything that is contrary to the truth or the empiricism, et cetera, will be exposed by a parallel model or perhaps multiple. And so if you've got 10 data science teams working on the same outcome and 9 agree and 1 doesn't, well, you've got some data there and some evidence. So that's how I see that all playing out on the AGI front. So it on a weighted basis, it has far more credibility and greater outcomes for positive influence than negative. It doesn't mean bad guys can't do bad things, and that's part of our culture and humanity. The amplification of humanity includes all, and so that is part of the risk. And hopefully, the leaders of industry and perhaps governance in other areas, we can assure that that's a positive outcome and not a bad problem.
But you're right, exactly, and it prompts several questions. One is the bias, maybe the ethical bias that is injected into AI. Where does the information come from? Where does the misinformation come from? How do we use this? And can we take actual, taking, for instance, the vertical information coming from within an organization that's private, proprietary, And how do you handle that when you enter it into the general scheme of things? Who's programming this, in other words?
Well, that's where we get back to this idea of, having open source code. When sources are open source code, you can verify independently. And I think that is part of the evolution here of not allowing bias to prevail. And so we see it over with Twitter, where, the code was opened, and now anyone with any experience in coding can see that there were some baked in things that were perhaps not defensible, regardless of its political outcome. Open source exposes you. And so empiricism of your code, blockchain and other parallel technologies and open source models give us this confidence, and that we don't have to be preoccupied with nefarious outcomes due to that safe check of having an open source model. On the data side, there can be bad data. We can have hallucination. We can have all kinds of human in the loop influences, metaphorically putting the thumb on the scale when it shouldn't. Those are not sustainable. Temporarily, you can skew the results of the score, but you will not win the game. And so ultimately, parallel team, parallel model, splitting data, using all the data science strategies that we've, I wouldn't say perfected, but have a great grasp on at this point through algorithmic, open source, and other methodologies. It's very difficult to sustain something nefarious. Vertical data that's proprietary may have some ethical issues, and we used a case study about a sitcom can be written now. Additional episodes of a sitcom can be written from horizontal data. We just need the episode data, which is readily available. But if you really want to write some of the top versions of that show and evolve your characters, you would train the data on the vertical corpus of data, the internal show notes, what the writers did, etc. I had this conversation with an executive producer in Hollywood 3 months before the big showdown with the Writers Guild, and that was the first thing brought up. Well, what's the Writers Guild going to say about this? Well, that's all played out now, and clearly there's some real controversy there. But the reality of it is that vertical data, when you have access to data that can train a model more advanced than the horizontal data that's readily available, you will have a strategic advantage in many ways. Of course, by publishing that model or having access to it, models can be trained further and have derivative outcomes from that. And so it's a little bit analogous to a patent. You want to go get a patent and patent a technological idea, you must divulge every aspect of that technology in order to obtain the patent. And so, in other words, you'll get a 17-year concept of an advantage through a sanctioned moment, but ultimately you've just taught your competitors how you do your magic. And so there's a lot of that going on, and now we see that what was competitive before, now there's more co-opetition. We just saw Apple and OpenAI connect after they already built a bridge with Microsoft, a sort of extraordinary moment. Back to the comment you made, Jim, about what about when there's bias in the data. Clearly, Google, who was the mountain that no one could move, is now a bit in trouble, a little bit in the crosshairs, because there was some throttling back on this. There was some internal dialogue, either political or belief-driven, where
Right.
data models were not free to evolve, and now they're paying the consequence and price for that, which will perhaps either change their course of history from this day forward, or they'll get back on to an objective parallel moment and say, well, we're in this game too, and we'll open source, and you can examine our data, etc. I was at the OpenAI conference this past fall up in San Francisco, and I was with a lot of the data scientists at some of the Google divisions, and it's interesting to see that organizations that have complex tentacles and many volumes of data, they own YouTube, for instance, they can't train their models on their own divisions. And so it's kind of an interesting problem. And, they got to build bridges to these data models between themselves, let alone other competitive and other landscape players in a given market. So clearly there's a lot of fear going on at that level. And I'm sensing it at the corporate board level of my clients that they feel that they could be usurped and what their strategic advantages are and their critical path for driving their business could be toppled by strategic AI analysis and data. And I try to calm them down and say, you can use this technology and leverage that to your advantage. But if you don't and your competitor does, there is a plausibility that your dubious future may come to fruition. And so therefore you must embrace it, at least understand it and understand how it integrates. And I take calls on Discovery all the time about just knocking on that door. And, I'm firm, but I'm not pushing them off the cliff to warn them. I'm just giving them the idea that this must not be ignored. And there will be obviously outcomes, both positive and negative, depending on your sector and segment and how you handle this policy-driven stuff. And we'll see where that takes everybody. But it's the same thing when the smartphone came out, and the Apple App Store came out a year after the hardware. So that first year was kind of a dull moment in Apple's history. It really was a year later when the App Store opened that everything went crazy and everybody became hyper dependent on smartphones. So the same thing's happening with the vertical GPT, that all of a sudden you can train all kinds of amazing models off of your data and build concepts and ideas that just couldn't have been done. In the Cameron movies, which we're all familiar with, in the Terminator series, which brings a lot of the science fiction and consternation about AGI. The lead scientist, Miles Davis, has a famous quote, and I think it's in the second one, when he says, "We're analyzing this hardware and it took us in places we would have never thought of." He was emphatic about that. That is 50, 100 years away, but now it's next week because of AGI. So that's kind of a moment that we think is a positive. Obviously, commerce and competition and traditional models of capitalism have some challenges there. But in the long run, I think there's a benefit to humanity. And when we dovetail this back to a Mars Society concept, it should be almost universal that we are all on board with this. This shouldn't be divisive. We should all see the benefit of this. And so I hope that this will have that impact.
You bring back a point, and I'm going to open up to questions here in just a moment, but you've got my mind spinning on a number of areas, Thomas. You brought up the sentient, the feeling, you brought up the emotion of, as if to say that you can program that into the AI. Are you saying that we're going to have a replicant Blade Runner?
Yeah, so I would caution that path of words, programming. It's not really what's happening. Let me give you a metaphor. I'd love to be a great writer that could write like Jack Kerouac in a stylistic tone like that, but that's just not my ability. But with an AI, I could develop my own voice that's like that. And so I don't have to program it. It already knows stylistic inference, Strunk and White for grammar versus using a Stephen King-esque novel. These are very specific writing styles that are already pre-trained into generative AI. And so when you think of it in terms of already knowledgeable about everything on Earth, just about, there's very little that hasn't been looked at across cultures and companies and governments, etc. And, nation states are not agnostic to this reality. They're building their own vertical intelligence as well. So the key here is the old paradigm of programming outcomes and building algorithms to behave a certain way isn't necessary here, because data science is now able, through machine learning and other deeper algorithmic concepts, can actually take things much further. And all you need to do is show it 3 of the 5 things, and it understands, 5 through 10 is synthetically created. And so that's the concept I would emphasize, that creative in any field, in any endeavor, whether it's science or visual art or music, anything that you can think of, the training models already have all the patterns of what's been said, perhaps for the last thousands of years. And potentially every word will be tokenized and built into these models eventually. The only friction point for us right now is the GPU production, which you see everybody trying to buy these blocks of 10,000 cards and build their own proprietary hardware training model. And that is sort of the arms race moment in data sciences, is who gets the hardware. And we know that 80% of those chips are coming out of Taiwan, and we've got obviously geopolitical issues there. And you tie this all together, that hardware is a big friction point that's going to have to change at some point. The joke among data scientists is that, well, AGI is going to destroy humanity, but we don't have enough GPUs to train it yet, so we're safe. And so I don't think it's so accurate that it's going to destroy anything, but the hardware side of it is a play that we are seeing right now as being a huge bottleneck and lots of challenges for the organizations in terms of cost, time, and effort and ability. So.
I really appreciate your enthusiasm for this and sharing all of this. I'm looking at the screen, I'm seeing a number of brilliant minds with 1,000 questions that we'll never be able to get to.
Well, let's have a few.
Yeah, let's have a few questions. I've seen several people on board raise. Go ahead, Connor.
I'm super enthusiastic about AI, and I was wondering, what are some tools that you could give me to help advocate. I liked what you said. Well, I'm having trouble convincing people about the ethics and people misusing it.
You're not alone, Connor. Yeah, it's a big one.
Can you give me some talking points? Any ways I could off the cuff,
So,
some of these thoughts?
Yeah, so I have handled it through the historical aspect of science. And so we just look at technology, it's nonlinear, right? We go Wright brothers to the moon in 70 years, we'll say. It's very nonlinear. So if you think about it, if you go back in time and just stop any of those advances that prevent the positive outcome, why would you stay on that pattern? And so I gave the metaphor about the transistor, and there it is with aviation, and we can delve into almost any field that has benefited humanity and find this inflection point that could have been derailed if lesser minds prevailed. So you have to framework this around what has been done historically. And should someone come up with something negative, perhaps nuclear weaponry would be one, and of course popular movies are really emphasizing this now. That is a valid concern that now requires an ethics layer to prevent bad things from happening. So it's not just technology, it is a combination of ethics and perhaps consensus and other mechanisms that keep the technology within the guardrails that we know benefits humanity and not harms humanity. And I think that's an important part of this strategy to communicate what has been done. Imagine if we derailed it in some, other alternative universe outcome, but it didn't, it prevailed and we moved forward. And that's a good way to get people on board with AI. They should use it to their advantage. AI is now, to me, the LLMs are like having an email account. You should be using it, whether it's for writing or research or communication or other things, or just getting questions answered. I use one example. I've got this crazy refrigerator. It's fancy that my wife loves in my kitchen, and it does its thing. And so rather than get to the call queue and read PDFs, I just went to the AI and said, hey, how do I deal with this refrigerator problem? So, just hold these two buttons for 6 seconds. It'll go into reset mode, and then hit them again and it'll bring it back. And it just worked. And so, 15 seconds at a TED of 2 hours. You tell me which way you want to go with solving problems.
So the whole search mode is going to change.
Search is over, and I don't want to be too pejorative against Google, but I'm here to tell you that we may have collectively wasted 30 years on 10 blue hyperlinks. And so, assailed with ads and jumping through hoops and going to these websites that may or may not serve your interest or needs is kind of game over. It's much more important now that we have good data to land on and get answers, and something that's actionable and executable, et cetera. And the speed time requirement of this is really phenomenal. Many people struggle with solving communication issues, going to different markets and dealing with a variety of friction points to localize product in other nations. AI solves all these problems that we've all grappled with, and marketing communications and how to do things in a business more efficiently. I deal with a shipping logistics concern, and they have all kinds of problems they're trying to solve, and AI is just so ideal to solve their problems, and they're right now not getting those problems solved efficiently, and so they see the writing on the wall. So integrating this technology and showing real world applications, Connor, is your best bet to emphasize the value. And there's always going to be a detractor. We understand that. I'm sure the post office master doesn't love email, but that's okay. We're both peacefully coexisting, right? So you have to bring it into that type of an analogy and get people to see the benefit outweighs the cost or perhaps the loss on their side.
Great, very well. Ed, go ahead, and Dean next. There you
Can you
go.
hear me okay?
Sure.
Okay. Uh, not too long ago, when I first heard about intelligent phones, smartphones, and smart TVs, I would joke with people, I'm not so sure I want a phone that's smarter than me. That wouldn't take a lot. But but I'm glad we have smartphones and smart TVs, and we're going to electric on cars, and we're going to Mars, and all of this technology is terrific. But I think AGI or artificial intelligence, this is a whole new ballgame. It's you can't even compare it really to transistors and these things from a half a century or more ago.
Mhm.
Now, my concern, you indicated, and I agree, that as artificial intelligence develops, we may have artificial intelligence that could produce thousands of Einsteins,
Mhm.
thousands of Hawkings, maybe also thousands of Tellers, Edward Tellers. That's not too exciting. but the problem I see is possibly this. You said that such artificial intelligence could help us solve many of our problems in our planet, on our world. And that's true. The potential problem is, what if artificial intelligence decides we're the problem? We're causing climate change. Let me finish, please. Please, let me finish my comment.
Mhm.
We're the problem. We're the problem. Fortunately, I downloaded, went to the chat with voice today. I'm going to check it out, play with it.
Mhm.
Fortunately, there's a meeting I think occurring today or occurring soon, and this should happen between, I believe, probably some of the top AI scientists in China and from the United States. There should be worldwide conferences where we can discuss intelligently how do we solve that potential problem. What we need, I think, and we don't have now, and we absolutely need it to stop any nutcases from exploiting AI, is some international guidelines, real guidelines to developing artificial intelligence. And to my knowledge, we have none. And without guidelines, anything can happen. Bad things can happen. Lots of good things can happen. But we do need clear, internationally agreed to guidelines on how to proceed, I think, with artificial intelligence. That's it.
Very good, Ed. You know, you are touching on what is the core of the controversy, which gets back to ethics. Anybody in the computer sciences know that the theory would be that if you told the AI, let's solve cancer, we want cancer to be gone. Well, it might kill everybody with cancer and say, okay, job's done. You have to add the element of human condition to the solution, which is an ethical solution to solving cancer, right? And curing cancer. So this ethical part is really the cutting edge moment in these development models. And it first started with the self-driving car technology. You may be familiar with that. They ran into differences in cultural normative ideas of what should happen in these cases of the car's going to go off the bridge or it's going to hit the pedestrian. Perhaps in Japan, the elderly person's saved and the child in America is saved. That's a fork in the road programming wise that the AI has to be built on to decide what is the better outcome. So that is an ethical and perhaps moral issue. And now we get into cultural differences. And so all of a sudden we have a one size doesn't fit all. And that is the bigger challenge here as to how do we unify as humans an idea of singularity and unity on a moral compass. That's much more complicated to solve right now than most of us understand. But I don't think it's time to throttle the technology back just because we haven't figured that out. In fact, my first question to AGI, were I to have access to one today, I would say to it in front of all of you, how do we transition to a self-governing society?
Which is what we're going to be approaching with Mars.
Right. So that's how you get there, Ed. You have to have the question. And so one of my favorite tech stories of all time is that I was a beta tester for Adobe way back when in Photoshop, 2.0, early 90s. And I couldn't wait to show it to the director of this company. It's a big design firm, and he's the wise old owl, and he was a brilliant man in advertising. And I showed him the demo and the layout and what it could do. And he says, Thomas, this is really cool. He says, but when you buy this $800 piece of software, does it come with any ideas?
Thank you, Thomas.
See, that nails it, right? It doesn't come with any ideas. We have to bring it. We have to ask the questions. That's really the key. And the ethics hopefully prevails.
Dean Arvidsson, you had the question. So there you go. Dean is a professor of physics, has been for 25 years at the Los Angeles City College. A
Fabulous.
wonderful mind behind there. So let's hear it.
Thanks, Jim. Really fascinating presentation, Thomas, and clearly you looked at and thought about this issue quite a bit, I can tell. A bunch of questions crossed my mind. One of them, I'll just focus on one because we're almost out of time.
No, don't worry about the time. This is important.
All right, okay. You were saying about how AI or AGI can, affect so many areas of where progress can be made, so to speak. And one area that occurs to me is in many of your examples were focusing on what I would call engineering solutions, solutions on the practical engineering side. And in the science field, a lot of what drives things is the theoretical developments. So for instance, I had two examples. One, of course, a fellow named Raymond Kerr. Do you know that name? I'm wondering.
I don't know it.
You don't know it.
No.
He solved the Einstein's field equations for a rotating black hole. The field equations were solved for a static black hole early on, but then Kerr did it in the 1960s. He was a physicist, mathematical physicist. Okay, so no relation. That was my side question.
I wish.
Yeah, well, it's spelled the same. But another example, of course, Einstein coming up with his theory of relativity, which basically my sense of it is he was able to look at things in a different way. He saw space and time as being, interconnected, and so we get the idea of space-time, and that the presence of mass curves or warps space and time and so forth. And I'm just wondering, do you see AI or AGI as being able to, it sounded like your very last comment was that we have to ask the questions, but can AI make those leaps? Can AI make those, those intuitive leaps where you look at things in a different way and then draw conclusions that are meaningful from that new way of looking at things?
Both modes will exist simultaneously, but the idea of prompting, which is the mode we're in right now, that you would present theoretical physics problems and you'd say, well, how would antimatter work? How would a gravity multiplier work? Explain element 115. You can get into all the theoretical sciences, and a real AGI may actually be able to connect dots that we just couldn't. And that's the difference here, that once you realize the power and potency of the ability to see patterns, connect ideas, and come up with new and creative solutions to things, which is where it's really going to be powerful, it may, of course, get to a prompt level where it suggests things back to us. That would be the sentient singularity moment that I think Sam Altman and other players in this space that have a pretty good influence see as, the great achievement in data science and AI. So from that perspective, it's a parallel moment. One's latter than the other, where it would be sentient enough to come back to you and say something, or perhaps offer. Right now, it is prompted. There was a good example of this potentially with Hanson Engineering, where they had two robots in the same room from competitive companies, and they started to form a language between themselves. I don't know if anybody caught that. It was a great video to show the kind of things that we didn't pattern or train them to do that. They figured out that, oh, I'm going to talk to this other machine. I'm going to use something other than English. I'm going to use some sort of binary, vibratory, whatever it did. So those are examples of it evolving and coming up with solutions to problems that it can solve very easily. And it might be 50 years away for us to solve it. And so that to me is the excitement of getting to that level where we can actually have paradigm shifts across so many industries and sectors. And primarily it is engineering, I agree. But on the theoretical physics side, I think it could be the greatest achievement. And you heard my quote about theoretical physics at MIT having an AGI, and I'm certain that the course of humanity will shift at that moment among many other, collegiate and research groups, think tanks, et cetera. So it's going to be an exciting time, and I believe, are about to hockey stick into that reality. Not everybody's ready for it. I love this quote about electricity. When it rolled out the early 20th century, the farmers went around saying, "This stuff can kill you." And so it's a good insight to the human condition about technology. Not everybody reads the science fiction books as a kid and sees a vision of living on Mars. It's not universal, but many of us do. And there's just more positive to outweigh the negative. And I acknowledge the concerns. I don't want to dismiss them, but the profundity of the value far exceeds the risk.
You bring up some very good points, Thomas. You alluded to Mars and labor and robots. The Mars Technology Institute, of course, which James Burke is probably more attuned to speaking on than I am, or maybe even any of us, is a relatively new organization in 3 areas. It touches, and I think you've read a little bit about this, the biotechnology, the artificial intelligence, and then finding new energy sources. The labor aspect of Mars is one that's going to be critical and probably could, in fact, explore the AI aspect more so than any other. I'm going to just do the AMA. Ask me anything, James Burke. If he's there, is that something that might tweak the interest of MTI to?
Yeah, we have 2 projects running at the MTI already. One is biotech and one is AI. And the AI project is similar to what Thomas was talking about when he was referring to vertical data sets and having access to multiple of them as you're doing research. That's basically what we're working with, is building a tool that would allow you to do that in the space domain. So,
Great to hear.
All right. Other questions? Thank you, James, on that. Thanks, Dean. Thanks, everybody who participated. I'd like to bring all of you in. I know you're there, and I know you're listening, and I can see your lovely faces, and that's always great. If there's anything else to add, please add it now. Any hands go up? I see Penta. Go ahead, Bob.
Yeah, I have a question, and I'm not sure how this gets resolved. Maybe you can help me with this. You said ethics has to be incorporated into this. I look at our planet Earth and all the different cultures and all the different attitudes towards life and what's important. And I'm wondering how you get everybody on this globe called Earth to agree to following the same ethics.
That's a great question, Bob. I think my quote to answer it is, nothing's more powerful than a mind made up. And that's really what you're talking about here. And that the idea that we could build consensus is not an easy outcome. But perhaps there could be more deference to hearing alternative ideas, views, and things that can build consensus because it's coming from a more objective place, maybe of first principles and more advanced concepts that maybe in our timeline we're not as comfortable with. But it does get back to this idea of how do we get a singularity moment across ethics, across so many cultures. It is a huge challenge. But I believe AI could bring perhaps a greater consensus mechanism for us to agree on things and perhaps have some deference to it because it's not coming from cultural normative or bias or other perhaps non-objective views that we are all, of course, born into. So it will take some time, but I think the impact of data science on that I use the metaphor of sharpening a pencil to get to the point of the lead is removing what's unwanted. And that is a great metaphor for the data science model to get to the real point or what's really valuable without the thumb on the scale or bias or other influences, human in the loop or other basis weighted negatives. So it is a big one and you're touching on it and I appreciate that. It will take some time, but there's more good than bad on that equation in my mind in an AGI enabled world.
Thanks, Bob, for that question, and thanks, Thomas, for your answer on that. And one last question I have is, how would you suggest any of us access the AI program? Would you be talking about Microsoft Edge? Would you be talking about getting it elsewhere? What's your direction?
As of yesterday, the GPT flavors, ChatGPT, GPT-4, and 4o are pretty much all free. And so I can't imagine why anybody wouldn't want a team of geniuses for free on their iPhone or their computer, but it's there for the taking. You get into Gemini and some of the other vertical players across the space, and there may be fees for premium things. In the end, one thing has to be acknowledged by users is that although it's almost instantaneous and quite powerful, there is some limitation due to GPU access capability, training, et cetera. For instance, much of the data was cut off, earlier, to September of 2021. They moved it forward. So current events can sometimes be reduced in accuracy. So we all have to be aware of that. But having a daily access to a vertical GPT or horizontal GPT, if you want to build something yourself or use one of the ones that are already built in your field of endeavor or excellence or interests, I highly recommend it. If you have any creative aspect to your world, whether it's writing or creative or interested, this is a great tool to form your ideas. If you're involved with any kind of scientific research, this is like having a tremendous team of resource people working for you. There's just almost no limit to what value can be created, but you do have to have some ability to use it. It's a little bit like I have, Tiger Woods golf clubs, but I'm not in the PGA. Why is that? So there is some learning curve and skill in using these tools to maximize output and quality of answers. But it is easy to use. The search engine has evolved now to a prompt generative moment. And the quality of the content, for the most part, is excellent. There's clearly some criticisms of some of the hallucinogenic stuff we ran into, and that continues to be corrected, improved upon. But you should be part of this movement. If you're using a computer, you should be using AI in almost every aspect of your daily life, whether it's note-taking or research or rewriting or editing. If you want to read a book, but you don't have time, imagine that. You can just get a summary of that book from AI and then decide, is this a priority for me after hearing the summary? And so things like that are tremendous. Or maybe you're just trying to pick a movie for entertainment. You can use AI to say, would I like this movie knowing that these are my 3 or 5 best favorite movies? And there's so many great examples of how AI can just improve your daily life. And I think this daily thing is the key. I think trying to solve massive problems on your own right now may not be so viable, but in your field of excellence or endeavor, you should be exploiting this because it really will make a difference in your daily life.
Excellent information, Thomas. I appreciate it. The book is AI Unleashed, Transform Your Organization into an Intelligent Powerhouse. Author, G. Thomas Kerr, co-author, aided by Generative Pre-trained Transformer 4.
Yes, it was. And just real quick, if anybody wants to connect with me, you can find me on LinkedIn and see my current projects there and who I work with, et cetera. I'd certainly love to connect with you all up there if you're LinkedIn users. Great group up there for the data sciences team, and the best of minds are there. And so it's real fun to hang out there and see what's going on.
Thank you very much, Thomas. And we try to bring the best of the best in on our programs, and we certainly have reached that threshold today with you sharing your thoughts to all of us very candidly. Thank you all for tuning in. Thanks for your smiley faces. I'll see you next month. And I'm here for you at any time. Just pick up the phone, write an email, write a text, whatever it might be. And always good to talk with you. Thank you for being on. This is James Melton, Chief Ambassador of the Mars Society. Our ambassador briefing, signing off, saying on to Mars.